And we're live. Hi, Donna. Good morning. And hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to Accessibility Talks. That's A11yTalks. Every month we meet virtually and talk about all things accessibility, generally focusing on website usability and broader topics, as you'll see this month. And each month we invite a speaker to present an accessibility topic. And then afterward, we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. And before I invite folks to give them the links for doing that, I want to take a moment to remind everyone that we seek to provide a friendly and safe environment. All of our participants should be able to engage in productive dialogue. We should all be able to share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect. So we require all participants to adhere to the Drupal Code of Conduct, and this applies to all community interactions and events. And this also applies to verbal questions as well as chat and text channels like our YouTube stream and across Twitter. My name is Amy June. I'll be hosting today. I am the the open source community ambassador at Canopy. And our speaker is A11yTalks' very own co-organizer, Donna Bungard, who's also works with Canopy, and she's a senior project manager over there. Donna is going to talk about accessible marketing practices. She'll talk about some of the practical ways we can incorporate accessibility into the marketing practices we may have already incorporated. And I would love to ask you a question before the talk. You use the word bake in your title. So I'm wondering, are you a baker?
Well, thanks to the conversation on Twitter, I actually prepped something in prep, so I love it. And I had to this is especially for those of you who are chatting with me on Twitter last night. I baked this just for all of you. So yes.
What is your favorite thing to bake, like genre of baking in general?
Historically, it's cupcakes because each one's a little work of art. But it really just depends on the mood. But it's usually a cake or a cupcake.
Cool. I like cupcakes because they're like manageable bites rather than like this big cake. But I am a huge music fan. And if you pay attention to the talks I host, I usually ask folks what is on their current playlist, because I'm always interested in what people are listening to. So what's on your playlist currently?
I'm trying to think. I was actually just listening to an audiobook. My playlists are all over the place. They go everything from 40s jazz, hence the inspiration, and that you'll see throughout today's presentations deck, to some very hard rock, to my guilty pleasures of 80s and 90s throwbacks, to I don't know. Truth be told, the last thing I listened to was David Lee Roth last night, but that wasn't really even my playlist. But I love it all.
Was it David Lee Roth or was it Van Halen?
It was David Lee Roth re-singing all of his songs in Spanish. Apparently, he didn't want somebody to ad-lib his songs or to force native Spanish speakers to have to necessarily learn English. So he learned how to sing everything. And it was playing in the background. It took me a minute because it was several words and then Yankee Rose. And it was really, really awesome to hear that this artist was like, okay, well, in his own way, he made it more accessible. And truth be told, this was not a planned part of the conversation on my part. I had no idea of this, people, everybody, dear humans listening. But in truth, he just made it more accessible by learning a second language in order to be able to present his songs that way. And I thought that was really cool.
That is a great story, because I love Van Halen in the David Lee Roth years. But without further ado, let's get Donna talking. And I do want to remind folks that you are more than welcome to post your questions in the YouTube stream or tag us on Twitter with the hashtag A11yTalks and ask your questions there. And we'll probably hold questions to the end. Is that right, Donna?
That works. If there's something really, pressing or time sensitive, feel free to interrupt me. But otherwise, we can just have more conversation at the end. I'll try not to go on too long to leave us plenty of space, because I think the most important part of this is, especially now in 2020 and all of this remote, to be able to engage as humans. So.
Okay, I'm going to drop off the screen and leave it to you, Donna.
Sounds good. Thank you. So yes, we're going to talk about how to bake some accessibility into your everyday practices, because, well, I want to actually start, before I get into it, let me start with something. I always want to assume positive intent, and I'm going to encourage you to all to do so too. I feel that this is a key factor in all accessibility, all inclusion issues, all of this is to assume positive intent. So I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you want to have accessibility be a key feature in what you're doing every day, but that maybe it seems challenging, maybe it sounds expensive, or maybe it's worrisome in some other way. So I always assume positive intent, and I'm going to extend that to during our experience here, in this call. Oh, that reminds me, Amy June, are captioning or transcripts links provided, or should I put them on through the slides?
I am going to start it now, but I do want to tell the viewers that the Thyssen transcripts will be a few seconds ahead of the speaking. So just be aware there's going to be a little bit of a timing issue with the transcripts today, but I'm going to start that as soon as I pull up the link.
Awesome. So we our intent is to make this easy for everyone to understand what we're talking about. I'll do my best to, any acronyms or anything, explain it along the way. But if I miss something, please know that my intent is to be as inclusive and as accessible as possible. And I'm going to assume that you all are doing the same thing too. But before we get too far, who am I? I am Donna Bungard, yes, Senior Project Manager over at Canopy. I have alphabet soup after my name because I love learning. And I love growing and that exploring and that curiosity out there. But in truth, I really feel like my training with accessibility goes a lot further back. Growing up, I was the only one in my immediate family without some sort of physical disability. And that just always made being accessible just what you did. It wasn't something you tacked on at the end. I mean, if I wanted my sister to help carry God knows how many groceries up 2 flights of stairs, I didn't carry them all up and then tell her about it after the fact. I made sure I was accessible right then and there. So I tend to be very pragmatic. And I'm also a little bit of a brat, seasonally appropriate. I don't know if anybody ever had hearing aids in the 80s where there was a lot of feedback if you got too close. So I was the little sister who'd go up behind my sister and go, jingle bells, jingle. So I never really took disability as a disadvantage. It was just a difference. It was a difference between my sister and I. It was a difference between my father with his physical challenges, my mother with hers, so on and so forth. And that's really going to put a lens on how we do all of this. But I mentioned I'm from Canopy. And because I don't want to talk the whole time, the TLDR is I get to work with really great people on really cool projects for really awesome clients. And it's fun and exciting. And I know that we're hiring positions, so go check out our website, talk to Amy June, all that good stuff. So where we left off, we have challenges. There are challenges everywhere. And we're going to be having all these on recipe cards because really we're going to just have a recipe for success here. So just the 411 recap, it's where challenges can be ambulatory, they can be audio, they can be cognitive, they can be visual, but they can also be situational. Then not all challenges faced are permanent. So it could be anything like, for example, I twisted my knee pretty fantastically putting a tree skirt on my tree 2 days ago. So I am very ambulatory, mobility challenged at the moment. but it can even be something shorter term than that, like a glare on your screen. Everything is temporary, everything is moving, and it's really important that we're going to talk about who your users are and people with disabilities who are experiencing challenges. But keep in mind that every member of your audience, of your that visits your site, is going to benefit. So the guidelines: World Wide Web Consortium, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We're going to hear me calling them WCAG. WCAG 2.1 is the international industry standard. We all typically aim for AA. Okay, so this is why we're here, right? So let's just get to the fun of it. Just fold it in. This is a reference to Schitt's Creek, and if you haven't seen that show, Google the YouTube clip of Schitt's Creek, Just Fold It In. It's saying how the instructions will tell you just fold it in, and no one tells you how to do that. We have all these regulations coming out, and all these marketing teams are being told, well, just make your site accessible. What? What does that mean? What does that do? And it seems big and it's scary and overwhelming. So let's just bring it down to something a little less scary. Quick things to look at. These are your go-to. Your colors. Are you going to be able to be perceived, or is everyone going to be able to perceive what's on your site? I'll never forget the day I was chatting with a different PM about a website, and I mentioned something about a gray bar not being accessible, and he said, "Donna, I'm colorblind. What gray bar?" He could not see it. Are the words you're using going to be understandable by your audience? Sometimes this is involving for cognitive, this regarding focus and being able to concentrate. Sometimes this is just, are you speaking at a grade level that isn't appropriate for either the educational background or really the attention span? I don't know about anybody else, but my attention span on this thing is not exactly fantastic. So are you being clear and concise and consistent? Are you using the same accessible voice throughout? Now, your tone might change here and there. How I chatter on Twitter is different from Facebook, which is different from Slack, which is probably a wee bit different than how I'm chatting with you all right now. But it's still me, it's still my voice, and that's something to keep in mind when you're working with your brand. And then, are you representing the larger audience? If you see me on LinkedIn, I think I'm on Donna Bungard at LinkedIn. Go ahead and check it out. I just shared a fantastic article the other day written how Hollywood needs to stop talking about different body types as being representative of the scary, the villain, the horror, all of these things. They're just different body types, and we're all built differently. And we all have things that are just unique to us, and how these situations need to be represented better. Look how you're representing your audience, and are you really showing your whole team there? So with these 4 pieces, here are some quick checks. Here's some quick things that if you're feeling overwhelmed, check these off. Is your logo accessible? Now, there's usually a gray area in terms of the WCAG guidelines around logos, but really it's who you are. It's basically your name tag. And if your users can't perceive and understand your name tag, it's not really doing you a whole lot of good. So is your logo accessible? Are your headers accessible? Are they the right color for the right size, having that right contrast? Are those eyebrows? I call them eyebrows. I've heard them called other things, but the little text above your headlines, do those have a high enough contrast? Are your links bright enough? Is your link hover state discernible? I've seen a lot of sites go between dark blue and slightly darker blue when you roll over it, and it doesn't work as well. Footer and legal links, those ones, because they're so small, they often are ones that fall off the contrast check. In terms of your words, are you using a lot of acronyms or numerums? I mean, we probably should say, we talk about A11yTalks, the A11y is a numerum for accessibility because there's 11 letters in the middle. you want to avoid slang or pop culture references, or at least explain them. I make a reference to Schitt's Creek's Just Folded In. I explained it. You want to make sure that those references are accessible and your content is of value. You want to aim for the 9th grade reading level. I mentioned something about the tone changing. A really great tool to help you and your team stay consistent would be a content style guide. It tells you kind of, hey, what words do we want to use and what words should we maybe avoid using, and just other things like, do you use the Oxford comma or not? There's a lot of nuts and bolts of your voice that you can help define. So that way, if you have a larger team, especially maybe if you have a nonprofit with volunteers and such, where everybody might not be as in the thick of it as you, fantastic tool to help your voice stay consistent. And then again, your representation. Make sure the images have meaning, but it just is inclusive while you're at it. A good way of doing this is to bake it into your personas. Now, when I'm talking about baking accessibility into personas, I'm not saying we're going to have a line that say, is this person disabled? How are they? No, somebody is not defined by experiencing certain challenges, or self-identifying as disabled does not embody who they are as a marketing persona. Gosh, no. It's just part of who they are. This sample, Howard Williams happens to love wheelchair tennis. There probably is a mobility concern there, or living with something there. This is not defining your persona as the accessibility persona. This is someone who happens to be one of your users, who happens to be a good representation of the larger group by having something different about them, not different, something fairly represented, having them be fairly representative of that larger community. And this Cornell University Disability Statistics tool is based off of CDC data. So you can say, because it's CDC, it is based off of binary gender. That may or may not apply to your group. But you can always leave that blank and not have gender identified when you're pulling up your data. But you can look at what percentage of individuals would have this. How likely is this group? Because frankly, once we all get over 60, 65-ish, according to that CDC data, we're all going downhill. In terms of mobility, cognitive challenges is increased, visual challenges dramatically increase. All of these things build up. So the age piece does typically make a difference if you're trying to determine how likely your users are. Just because I'm asked this question a lot, I'll just say that there are no sniffers due to privacy in terms of being able to determine if your users are using an assistive technology. There's no way to say, oh, hey, this percentage of my population uses a screen reader. Oh, this many people use eye tracking. There's no way to tell that. That would be a huge invasion of their privacy. But if you need data, because when we're building our marketing personas, right, we're looking for both demographic and psychographic data, but we need data. When you're looking for the data, this is a cool tool to use. One moment. I haven't finished all 3 shots of espresso, so I'm still speaking at a human speed. I need to fix that. So content strategy. The key to all content strategy, it does not matter if we're talking about accessibility or not. The primary objective is to remember that the end user needs to be the hero of their own story. My mobile experience and my story earlier was when I was driving back, I used my phone to order a coffee, and in the end, I got a coffee. But because of that experience, I was able to be the hero of my own story. Is it the most exciting story? Probably not, but I am still the hero of my own narrative there. Our jobs as marketers and content strategists, our jobs are to make sure all of our users are able to be that hero, are able to go through the conversion process. So like all content strategy, you need to define those conversion goals and empower that user to imagine themselves to be part of that story and give them a next step. This is no different than for a sighted user versus perhaps a non-sighted user using a screen reader. They need that equal experience if you want users to convert. Let me actually just back up a minute. When I'm saying that, you need the users to have that experience no matter what to be able to convert. You want user conversions on your site. That's why we have them. That's why we track metrics. Accessibility isn't some sort of charity. It's about getting your users to that conversion point and successfully converting, regardless of challenges from whether it be a person who identifies as being disabled, or just somebody who's with low bandwidth or some other challenge. This is not charity, this is strategy. So 3 to-dos: always give context. Those alternative texts or captions, giving those image captions for more complex images are really important. That's coming up a lot lately as more and more is going digital right now. Always keep things focused. Something to keep in mind if you're working, especially if you're someone who's targeting a younger group, because statistically, the individuals who are diagnosed with ADHD or autism spectrum disorder, it's increasing in younger groups. Now might just be our diagnosis. That would be my guess, but I am not a doctor. I have no way of knowing this. But those diagnoses are going up. So we know that the younger personas are more likely to experience challenges here. In those situations, it's sometimes like, it's like being the kid who's getting all the dodgeballs thrown at them. If you have a really, really busy site, all that input is coming at you, and it's like you aren't able to filter it out. And I think we all have moments like this, but even observing individuals who experience those challenges, I see how hard it is to stay on that user journey. So I can appreciate where that's coming from in that need. And also keep in mind that a lot of adults, especially in technology, who find that challenging of not being able to filter, have found tools to help them that just shut all that other stuff off. So if your site is being dependent on all of this stuff happening at once, you're going to lose users, whether they divert from the user journey to conversion, or they might already have something to shut everything else off. So keep it focused and always make sure the next step is perceivable and usable. A great pet peeve of mine is seeing that, we have these great social share icons at the top of a blog post, and it's an engaging blog post. And then at the end, they're not there. So an individual using only a keyboard navigation or a screen reader navigation or something along those lines would have to back up to the top to share it. And I don't know about others, but I know that there's very little chance that I'm going to ever do that. I'm never going to backpedal up all the way manually that way. It's just not a good UX. Inclusive media. Touch a little bit on that. Just going to do a quick time check. Great. Text alternatives, make sure that they're meaningful. Saying their example, a kitchen utensil, doesn't really tell you much. For different types of spatulas is a little bit more, concise. It's a little bit more meaningful. Audio captioning, live transcripts, and descriptive text can go above and beyond. Descriptive text meaning woman with skin sort of done victory curls sitting here talking to you, waving her arms around dramatically as she speaks. That would be an example of descriptive text. Descriptive text is not required at the AA level, but it's really important to keep in mind if there's something of value that you're sharing. The idea is to give everybody the ability to get value regardless of WCAG level. Keep in mind about how colors are perceived. There's amazing stimulators out there. And again, representation matters. We all have our own bodies, our own stories, and they're all really cool in their own way. So just make sure you're grabbing your whole team, all your peoples. So where do we go from here? Practicing empathy. I always forget about this slide in that salmon mold. It was too horrifying not to include somewhere in here, but that just always gets me. But building empathy. I feel I'm pretty good at accessibility work because of having grown up, having to be empathetic, having to know that, I still do it. I go up to my father on his right side. He's blinded on his left. Unless I wanted to be a jerk and be rude, and I'm not saying that I didn't occasionally as a kid, but typically I do it without thinking. When I'm talking to my sister, I didn't even realize I did it. She called me out on it. I enunciate more because I know she's reading my lips. I do these things out of habit, particularly with my family. But we can branch out. We all have some sort of lived experience. It won't be my story. It won't be my story. But we all have some sort of lived experience that can help us build empathy. And then for things that we're completely unfamiliar with, there are simulators out there. And Funkify is a Chrome add-on that's a really good one that has some personas that will replicate certain challenges. Everything from diabetic retinopathy to, I always say that quickly because I never feel like I'm saying it right. But everything from that to dyslexia. I had never understood the importance of not using all caps until I had a simulator. To all these other things, there's different ways of looking at life. And the biggest piece of it is that empathy. Because if we can empathize and put ourselves in someone else's experience at least a little bit, to be able to understand the context of why something is important for that user journey, we're able to foster meaningful action and meaningful practices. So for your marketing team, if it's not already, a lot of systems are starting to make it already, but if it's not already, make the alt text field required on your website. That's it. People have to put in alt text. Is it going to stop everybody from putting in, kitchen utensil? No, of course not. But it's a step in the right direction. Practicing empathy might mean your team members learn rudimentary screen reader skills. Are you going to be the equivalent of a native user? Of course not. Are there articles out there and proof out there that it's valuable for at least some consideration? Of course it is. Because if you're a strategist, you start thinking in terms of, oh gosh, maybe I need to do this. If you're a developer, you're starting to say, oh, wait a second. That's why ARIA labeled by does this. If you're a project manager, maybe you're starting to see, okay, I'm responsible for getting X, Y, and Z done. Now I get why these things have to happen. It's that context. And then testing with native users cannot be, it's very, very important. Native users are someone who would use that assistive technology every day. And I have rudimentary screen reader skills. I am absolutely, a novice compared to someone who would use these tools every day. It's fantastic. A couple things to note though. If you're testing with native users, monitor the testing. If we're wondering if individual cannot perceive something, they won't know what they haven't perceived. And please pay your testers. Going back to building an experience so you can sell somebody something. It is not that somebody's responsibility to make it so you can sell to them. And it's not your charity to make it so you can sell to them. So therefore, it's not their charity to test your work to make sure you can sell to them. Pay your testers. It's just about respect. So with that, do we have any Q&A?
Yes. Imelda, who was a speaker here previously, hi Imelda, she had a question about design. Why does design view accessibility practices as a premium when designing?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Why does design view accessibility practices as a premium when designing?
I can't say every team is going to view it as a premium. It's typically a cultural thing of the organization. I would say that whether or not it's become ingrained as the organization's culture to just build it into best practices, your UX team should already be thinking about things like finger spacing on buttons for mobile. That's one that always gets me because I'm often scrolling through things, watching TV, and I, fat finger it plenty. But if I were to have a hand tremor, that would be much harder. So your UX team should be considering these things right along. I've always suggested that accessibility, if you're doing a discovery, accessibility concerns should be considered then as well. There's a lot of things you can catch at the wireframe stage, at the mock-up stage. And if your design team doesn't necessarily, or if you're working with a design team that hasn't made that a priority, you should be reviewing wireframes and mock-ups and all of this right along anyway. So if you have areas of concern, go for it. In terms of premium, not premium, I think every organization might define what that is a little differently. I know we do our best to bake it into our practices, and again, assume positive intent. And maybe there's another question there that's outside of a designer's control.
There's a question. What would you recommend to do first for people new to accessibility and already know marketing?
Oh, excellent question. There are a lot of really cool things. I'm of course going to say go through the A11yTalks YouTube and view a few things, because shameless plug, subscribe. No, seriously, that there are lots of resources out there. I would start by reading. I would start with some articles. I love reading stuff at WebAIM. I know I've written a few things over at the Canopy site, but there's a lot of fantastic writers out there. I know our own Carrie Fisher has been in Smashing Magazine, as well as A List Apart. Many of our guests here have been published as well. There's too many to name. I think I just start reading into maybe even what the laws are in your area, because maybe that'll give you the context. I'm trying to think of how I got into this, and I started trying to understand what the 508 refresh was and when it was coming into law. And I started studying because I was curious. What piqued my interest was actually the Winn-Dixie case. So I started looking into the legal and why. For example, in the Winn-Dixie case, for those of you who don't know, a gentleman in Florida was trying to order or refill a prescription online and was unable to. And it was said that the website was a portal to the brick and the brick and mortar location of the pharmacy in question. And because he was not able to get to the pharmacy online, therefore they were in out of compliance. So I found that really interesting, and I was like, well, wait, what else is being said? What else is being spoken to? And then I started looking at tools. Like, I like the Chrome add-on Wave. It's not overly technical, and you can start just looking at sites that you look at and click on it. And I'd also go ahead and start downloading Funkify and just start seeing those simulators, and then kind of follow where your curiosity leads. You've got to be curious.
I want to tag on to that. I know with the previous company I worked for, they were really big on social media, and having them listen to social media posts and reading their emails with a screen reader was really enlightening for them, knowing that, you know, how the hashtags were read as like if they were camel case or not camel case, and then where their emoticons were placed in their Twitter feeds, you know, so that really helped that director of marketing out, just having, like, building on that empathy of hearing what others were experiencing.
Actually, and to say that if you have, and I'm going to set this thing off, but if you have an Alexa, and sorry, if you have one of those, you can use your phone to send a message and announce. And if you want to hear that, like, we have fun with it, but we'll often say things, you know, to our kids, you know, it's dinner time or something along those lines. And my husband especially has fun putting about 30 emojis in there. And then for the next 3.5 minutes, we're listening to that device read off every emoji. So if you're curious how something is going to sound, you can always do that for a quick gut check.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, what are some good companies or organizations for finding usability testers with disabilities?
Native users. Excellent question. There are a few out there. There's a few, I know, what was it? Perkins School for the Blind is a well-known one for those who are using screen readers. I've read about, but I have not interacted with a company called Loop 11. You're welcome to follow up with us on Twitter, and I know there's others, but of course I'm blanking on all of them now. Imogen, you look like you might know a few.
I know a good resource. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California in the United States. And we have a Lighthouse group in the Bay Area, and Lighthouse is I don't know if it's international, but I know it's definitely national within the United States. And there's usually Lighthouse groups in the major cities or metropolitan areas. And they not only train people if they're new to a disability, like say someone has a situational blindness, they teach people how to use the software, but they also train people to be testers, and then they have resources. And another thing that we've used at a previous agency I worked for is just going through the university. We live by UC Berkeley, and we actually just reached out to them, and they had user labs. And so we could take our websites to these user labs, and people would, and we did pay the users. I think it was like $350, you know, for a 1-hour user lab with 3 different people, you know, so the people got paid. So that was really nice. But the Lighthouse group is a great resource, and you can just go to their main website and they will connect you, you know, because they know where all the different folks are.
And they do have different, they also have a tool online, that a browser add-on too, that you can use, but that's a fantastic resource, Imogen. Thank you. I was like, I'm blanking on someone important. Thank you.
Now I have a question. I don't work on websites before they're built. I'm always like after they're already built. So I always have questions about like the user experience and how they mock up the wireframes and stuff. How many personas do you recommend to really have a diverse representation? And then how many do you need to represent in your domain, and how do you figure that out?
Typically, there's no, you know, special thing for accessibility. So baking it in, you know, most organizations have 3 to 5 personas, usually 3 primary, and then occasionally a couple of secondary personas. For example, higher ed, they have secondary personas being, you know, your school guidance counselor. That actually might be a primary one, depending on the work. But so you're going to want, you know, definitely no more than 5. You never want to be talking to more than 5 people in the room, so to speak. But just to use that higher education as a good example, one of your personas is you're going to have probably 2 different types of students be your personas. And by different types, it will be maybe different focus. If you're a university, it's somebody who's coming in looking to go straight through to their master's or a longer program versus someone who's coming in for a shorter thing, you know, depending again on what your options are. And it is more than entirely reasonable to build that, to identify one of those personas as having a challenge. Statistically speaking, you can look at, there are certain fields of studies that do attract individuals of certain mindsets more than others. And those mindsets are often associated with particular diagnoses. And it's just all of us learning to play to our strengths. It's no different than me being the liberal arts person because I liked to talk too much. So it's the same idea, but knowing your persona and knowing your users, there's definitely patterns you're going to see, and there's ways you can apply that. And another great way of doing it is if you are lucky enough to be working with a group like a higher education where you can talk to your students, grab a focus group, talk to the students, talk to them, ask them about their parents, because their parents are usually, or guardians, there's usually key stakeholders there too. And you can just have that transparent, open communication. It's going to help you in every aspect, not just accessibility and marketing and persona development. But it's another really good way of doing it is to interview those users and see it. I feel like I talked a lot. Did that answer your question though?
Yeah, it did. And I have another question too, is I do use Funkify, but my experience of it is, of course, different than other people's experience of it. You mentioned the dyslexia aspect of it. It also has a color blindness simulation as well. Do you think that that's pretty close to like real life?
There's a free version of Funkify, which is what I use, and that only grabs the most common type, red green. I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the official name appropriately without looking at it, so I'm just going to call it red green from now. That only uses that one. There are better simulators out there if you want to do all of them for free. The way I use Funkify isn't always for testing or an assessment. The way I use it is when I'm talking to stakeholders who don't have any frame of reference. Again, I'll only speak to my story. Many years ago at New England Drupal Camp, sat down next to my friend to listen to Brian Cranston of the Charleston School for the Blind do a screen reader demo. And I was blown away. I had to close my eyes because of the speed he was listening to things. It was dizzying. Prior to that, I had no frame of context. I mean, I had listened to my mother, who's had failing vision, listen to books on tape and listen to videos with descriptive text or descriptive audio. I was familiar with a lot of those tools, but I had never seen a native user using a screen reader. Funkify is the same way. If you don't have any context, you need something to put yourself in that frame of mind that, okay, I know that other people's lived stories, that other people's ability to perceive is different. That, you know, we all know that that perception is different. But to see an example of a different perception makes it real. So I don't necessarily use it when I'm doing an assessment. When I'm doing an assessment, I just go by and I usually, my go-to is the WebAIM color contrast checker, but I know a lot of users use a lot of other things. Contrastchecker.com is a great one, especially if you have an image and you need to do a gut check real quick. There's a lot of fantastic tools out there, but Funkify for me is to just make it real.
Makes sense. I had the free version too, so that's why I was asking about the different simulations, because I just didn't have any reference to it either. I don't see any more questions in chat or on Twitter. Do you want to close off with any closing thought, Donna?
I find that when I'm talking to marketing teams, the first meeting, and I've had a few of these in the last month too, the first meeting is, I don't know what to do. Just make this go away. Just make this go away. I don't know what's going on. I have a deadline by this date and nobody on my team, I got a report, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. We need to make this go away. I have this deadline. The first thing I tell everybody is it doesn't have to be this hard. It's also going to evolve. You're never going to be done, just like with our content strategy, just like with your website content in general. Being accessible is never done. It's a moving target. It's an evolving target. I mean, think of this 2020 with so much going remote. It's becoming more common to turn on captioning just on a casual Zoom call, which is fantastic for so many users, whether it be that there's an auditory challenge, or maybe it's their auditory challenge is very often, I have fourth grade in earshot, usually, about 7 feet to my right now, because we're homeschooling during the COVID crisis here. There's a lot of distractions. Individuals who maybe don't identify are needing the assistive tools just as much as someone who does identify as being disabled. People with disabilities are just another aspect of our audience, and it's becoming more commonplace because everybody's at home and we're dealing with so much more. So with that, breathe. Just breathe. If you make incremental improvements and state the good intent, you're going to be okay. And you know what? Make 20 changes this month. And I'm saying individual changes, like maybe you're fixing all the color contrast, really 2 lines of code, but it's 20 changes. Make this month. Make that improvement. If you want to do an accessibility statement, that's something that legal teams have to determine where they fall in, though. But if you're going to do that accessibility statement, state we're working on improved situations. Tell us what you need. Give people a voice. Listen to your users. Listen to your team. Assume positive intent and be human, because it's okay. Breathe. We got this. It's going to take us a little while, but right now we're all pickles in one big jar of 2020. And some of us are sweet and some of us are salty and some of us are a little dilly, which Amy Jean saw me type earlier and she was shaking her head then too. But seriously, we're all in this together. It's going to be okay. You've got this. Just take a step forward in the right direction. See where your curiosity leads you. See where your users lead you, and you're gonna get this down.
Thanks, Donna. All of the links will be available when we post the transcripts and everything on YouTube. Remember to join us next month and every month moving forward. We do have a new website, which is a great archive for all of our videos along with the YouTube channel. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter. And we're A11yTalks across all of the things. And I do want to remind folks that we are recruiting new speakers. We do try to make an effort to include historically excluded groups that have been historically excluded in tech. We want to introduce them into our speaker lineup. So let us know if you have any ideas on how we can make it more friendly to everyone. If you want to talk, or if you have suggestions of what you might want to hear about next, or if you have a speaker suggestion for us. So thank you, everybody, and have a good new year and happy holiday season.
Bye all. I feel like I should close out with the cake so